Это наше светлое будущее?
Нет. Okay. If there are teachers in the room, please don't take personally what I'm going to say. I'm not going to talk about the teachers here, I'm going to talk about the teachers there. Because I'm not going to say nice things in the beginning. Okay. School system sucks. No? Okay. This picture I took last year in April, 2 streets away from here. It's a graffiti on the wall of a school. And when I saw it, this inspired me to do this presentation. And I'm asking myself, who has written it? I presume that a teacher of this school did not went in the middle of the night and put this graffiti on the wall. It's a student that went there. You know, the interesting thing that if you go today to a school and you ask pupils and you ask them in the playground, not in the classroom, how many of you like schools? Like school? What kind of answer you think you will get? So I'm asking the teachers, how can you stand there and teaching children that hate you and hate the system you're working in? How can you look at yourself in the mirror? So when I was little, like every child, I went to school. And the teacher came to the classroom with the finger. Remember the finger? The studies are very difficult. A lot of children fail. If you don't work hard, you're going to fail. So I got scared. And this was the introduction to my education. So it was very boring. I was asked to sit still, not to move, and to listen. Trying not to fall asleep. And it not happened only in school, it went all the way back to university. It was really boring. So what happened in education? Was I educated?
Yes.
Or was I trained like a monkey to perform certain tasks? Now, during my school years, I learned something called logarithms. Can anybody explain to me what this is for? Can anybody explain to me how logarithms help us to understand who we are and help us to understand our human existence? We are filling our head with information,
В наших головах очень много информации
make us think logically like a machine,
и заставляет думать логично,
tell us how to think and how to behave.
как думать, как действовать.
Education is destroying our creativity.
И обучение разрушает нашу креативность.
Because according to one philosopher of education
Как один философ обучения говорил,
called Ken Robinson,
Робинсон,
he said that a teacher
он сказал, что учитель
use his body as a transport to his head.
и использует его транспорт для головы.
Usually only one side of the head, the logical one.
И использует только правую логическую часть мозга.
So we get punished,
И нас наказывает,
we learn to be okay people,
мы становимся как бы хороши.
and the main thing are the exams.
И самая основная вещь это
We are tested on our memory.
и экзамен просто смотришь, что мы научились.
I rem-
С воспоминанием.
I remember I was sitting all night,
И я вспоминаю, когда я весь ночь сидел,
filling my head with information, trying to memorize it.
засовывал в голову очень много информации, чтобы вспомнить.
I went to the exam room very carefully,
И когда я ходил на экзамен, как с кружкой,
with my glass full of information,
как будто мой стакан был полон информации,
I vomited it on the paper,
и это я вернул на бумагу,
and the next day I forgot everything.
и на следующий день я не вспомнил ничего.
So basically what schools do, they uniform us.
То, что делает школа, она одевает как будто форму.
And these are the priorities in education today.
Это приоритет обучения наших детей.
Mathematics, science, languages,
И языки.
and then only then humanities and art.
И тогда мы можем что-то делать.
Talking about languages,
Если говорить насчет языков,
every child in every country in the world,
каждый ребенок, каждое другое государство,
around the age of 4 or 5,
в возрасте 5-8 лет,
speaks the language of the country correct.
и говорит правильно на своем языке.
Then the child goes to school
Когда он ходит в школу
and learns how to read and write the language.
и учится как писать,
And then they learn grammar
потом учится грамматике,
to understand why the language is written and spoken that way.
почему надо использовать язык таким образом.
And then something tragic is happening.
И тогда происходит что-то критическое.
They try to teach a child a foreign language.
И начинают обучать иностранным языкам.
And they teach the grammar first.
И тогда начинается с грамматики.
This is why we adults have difficulties in studying foreign languages.
И это есть причин того, почему у нас трудно учиться иностранным языком.
I just read 2 hours ago on the internet
Я зашел в интернет,
that in one university I've studied,
в одном университете, в котором я учился,
they just closed the department of French culture.
назывался департамент французской культуры.
Among the few academic degrees that I have,
И получил несколько градусов.
I have also a degree in French literature.
И получил также град французской культуры.
But they closed it because probably it's not useful today.
Но это закрылось, потому что это не было полезно.
In French literature there are too many radical ideas.
Потому что в французском институте слишком много радикальных людей.
So we sit in classroom.
Когда сидит
If we want to talk,
если вы говорите,
we raise our hand to ask permission to talk.
тогда вы должны поднять руки, чтобы спрашивать разрешение говорить.
We cannot talk. We can ask a question.
Вы не можете говорить, вы можете просто сказать.
And then the teacher gives an answer.
А и учитель просто дает ответ.
But we're not allowed to communicate with each other.
И вы не позволяете говорить между собой.
There is another definition of a teacher.
И другой задача учителя.
A teacher is a person
Учитель это
who transfer the information from his papers
который переводит информацию из его журнала
to the papers of the students
на бумагу учеников.
without the information going through the head of none of them.
Но эта информация не заходит в голову.
We create corporate slaves.
Это создается просто корпоративные рабы.
So, after years of work, when we retire,
После когда мы заканчиваем работу,
we can die peacefully.
мы можем умереть просто после пенсии.
I was giving a lecture in a school,
Я произнес речь в школе,
and I've asked young men a question.
и я спрашивал молодого парня вопрос.
What would you like to, what are you going to do after school?
Я спрашивал, что ты будешь делать после школы?
He said to me, I'm going to university.
Он сказал, я буду в университете.
What are you going to study?
И что ты будешь учиться?
Computer sciences.
Ну,
Why?
зачем?
There is money in it.
Потому что там есть много денег.
And I want you to imagine
И можешь представить,
that I gave you so much money
когда ты получишь столько,
that you don't need to work a day in your life.
и тебе не будет надо работать на один день.
What are you going to do then?
Что ты будешь тогда делать?
I'm going to study art and drama.
Тогда я буду учиться искусству и драму.
So these young men have sold his soul to the devil of money. Are we educating children to fit society, or are we shaping society according to children's needs? Now, when I was looking through the education of, through the history of education, already in ancient Greece, Plato, Aristotle, and Socrates were talking about the aims of education. And Aristotle said, and I want to remind you that this was 400 years before Christ. It was 2,400 years ago. Aristotle said, educating the mind without educating the heart is no education at all. We've got also a Persian philosopher in the 11th century. He was talking about the tabula rasa, which is the blank slate, which means that people are born with a blank slate, and education supposed to help them to actualize themselves. Because, well, the question is, and I don't have the answer, are we born in certain talents, or are we acquire them from very early age? Then John Locke, English, was talking about an association of ideas. Jean-Jacques Rousseau, French philosopher, 17th century, he wrote a famous book called Emile. And in this book, he said, why we're putting children in the classroom, in a closed space, and teach them about trees and animals? If you want to teach them about trees, let's take them to the forest.
Очень много и пойти в лес, там сейчас начнут животных.
Then we've got Rudolf Steiner.
Много розовых штанов.
He talked about the investigation of the physical world around us. We've got the Montessori method that encourage children to develop their own initiative and natural abilities through practical play. Because what actually happens in a lot of kindergartens today, now children, we're going to do this, and now we're going to do that, because this is my plan and I know better what's good for you. There is a school in England called Summerhill, established by Neil. He believes strongly in democratic education. And he said that happiness should be the most important decision in the child's upbringing. And personal and happiness comes from a sense of personal freedom. When a child's happiness is being repressed with the finger, with the fear, then this repressed child might have psychological disorders in adult life. Makarenko. It's interesting because very few people in the West know or heard about Makarenko. It's very hard to find his books today. They are out of print. He was advocating the real Soviet education. Of course, eventually Stalin has closed him down. Maybe he was too much into shaping personalities. But what he said is creating a person who first of all does not care about himself, but about the collective. And about humanity at all. So when you were talking about Barrett, the highest level was service. What I understand from it is service of the community and the humanity. Krishnamurti, Indian education, was talking about a holistic outlook, free from all prejudice. And the whole life, from a moment you are born till the moment you die, is an educational process. And so I can say that education begins at birth and ends in death. But we can extend it a little bit, because if we talk about the prenatal experiences, we already know that the child in the womb of the mother is already affected by his surroundings. So maybe education starts in the moment of conception. And maybe education does not end in death, but become the collective unconscious that just is around us. Then we've got Gurdjieff. He's talking about that most humans live in a state of hypnotic walking sleep. He was talking that actually lucid dreaming helps us to achieve our full human potential. A student of Gurdjieff, Uspensky, was talking that there are few ways for self-development. One is the way of the fakir, dealing only with the physical body. The way of the monk, dealing with the emotions. And the way of the yogi, dealing with the mind. But there is a fourth way, which does not require us to abandon the world, the fourth way, which doesn't ask us to abandon the world, the world, go out of the world. Okay, it's to teach the person to work in harmony with his physical body, emotions, and mind. Because education is concerned from everything that comes from the neck up. And we forget that we have a body. And because the body never lies, we're developing psychosomatic diseases when we ignore the fact that we have a body. Psychosomatic diseases happen because we don't listen to our body. Janusz Korczak, a Polish educator, Jewish, during the German occupation, he collected children in the ghetto and started teaching them. And when his children were sent to die, he decided that he will go with them. Okay, Shetinin, a very famous school in Russia. And in this school, actually, the pupils live as a community, and build this school and maintain this school together as a community. But one of the things that I have difficulty with his method, because his pride is that when a child finishes school, he was already on a master degree level of a university. So he sees that the academic achievement is very important. In England there is a system that they have table leagues of schools. Table leagues, like football. Table leagues of schools. They statistically measure the achievement of the pupil, and they publicize in the newspapers which are the best schools according to achievement, and which are the worst schools because the pupils don't achieve good marks. So what happened in those schools? If you're not studying well,
Если ты плохо учился,
if you're falling behind,
если ты оставался,
not because you are stupid,
может ты тупой,
because you are intelligent enough
может ты интеллигентный,
to ask yourself a simple question.
вот спрашивал простой вопрос.
How relevant is what I'm studying to my human existence?
И нужно ли это от меня обучаться, чтобы
I still today don't know how I passed my mathematics exams.
и я до сих пор не понимаю, как я сдал экзамен.
I still don't know how much is 7 times 8.
И также не знаю, как я 7 отчислил.
So in a way, when we measure everything statistically,
Если мы все просчитываем это статистику,
we are missing the human aspect.
мы забываем человеческий фактор.
Because if we think a little bit deeper,
Если мы подумаем немного,
we know that statistic is a poor scientific tool
и просто осознать, что это просто научный метод,
that can prove any way the researcher is going to manipulate it.
что это использовать, чтобы просто манипулировать.
So enough is enough.
То, что
Let's get angry.
и дети становятся очень злыми.
This is what happens. You see, we all send our children to schools.
Это то, что происходит, потому что все посылаем в той школе.
Why?
Зачем?
Because they have to get education.
Потому что если у них надо получить образование,
So now let's be positive. Let's be enlightened and transpersonal.
хорошо было, если это было просветленное и трансперсональное.
Solution.
Что же делать?
Now, as you have noticed before,
Как мы слышали перед этим,
when I was presenting the different philosophers of education,
я говорил о нескольких философах учений,
among those philosophers,
многие из них,
there was not even one American,
никто из них не был американцем.
and nobody was from California.
Даже если не из Калифорнии.
Just for those who think that everything that is intelligent and enlightened comes from California.
И из всех, кто будет просветленным, даже если мы думаем, даже если мы понимаем,
So, to not upset my American friends,
чтобы не огорчить моих американских друзей,
I put something American.
поставил одного американца,
Abraham Lincoln,
Абрахама Линкольна,
100 years ago,
100 лет назад,
said,
он сказал,
the dogmas of the quiet past are inadequate to the stormy present.
долго которые раньше были работать, а сейчас
We need to change.
нам надо измениться.
But if you look if you look at education,
Если мы посмотрим на образование,
nothing has changed.
ничего не изменяется.
We still teach frontally.
Мы также делаем как раньше.
We still don't create a dialogue.
Мы не делаем диалог.
So the question is,
Самый главный вопрос есть.
what kind of world we want to leave behind us
И вопрос в том, какой мир хочем оставлять за нами.
for our children?
Какой мир мы будем отрезать.
Because education
Потому что образование
is shaping the future citizens of our humanity.
потому что образование создает общество будущее.
And as the education is so much concerned with order and discipline,
Если делается, получается ставленность,
when we grow up in this so-called democratic society, we usually in the election vote for strong leaders. We usually vote for strong leaders. Because we need strong people to tell us what to do. Because due to our education, we've got three major problems. One is difficult in making decisions. difficulty in choosing a direction,
и трудно выбрать направление,
and fear of intimacy.
и также страх и интимность.
People are dangerous, don't trust anybody.
И люди очень опасаются, но никому не веришь.
So I want you to imagine
И вы можете представить,
that we're going to create a kindergarten,
и если мы создавали детский сад,
where we're going to teach children to meditate,
где мы обучали детей медитировать,
to close their eyes, listen to their breathing, and listen to their inner reality.
и просто обучать закрывать глаза, слушаться внутри и внутреннюю реальность.
When we're going to teach children lucid dreaming from kindergarten,
Если мы учить детей осознанно сновидению уже с детского сада,
to help them to develop their non-logical imagination.
и учить их визуализировать.
You see, we're trying to understand everything logically,
И мы пытались создать логично.
but our so-called problems,
Такое название проблем,
emotional or physical,
эмоциональные, физические,
are irrational,
и они иррациональны,
illogical.
нелогичны.
They created by our imagination.
Эти проблемы создают наше воображение.
Imagination is very important.
Потому что это воображение очень важно.
All the big inventions
Все большие открытия
happened because of imagination.
происходили, потому что было воображение.
Do you know that Jobs, the creator of Apple, what was his full name? Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs never finished university.
Если вы знаете, когда Стив Джобс, который создал
Richard Branson also did not finish university.
никто из них не заканчивал университет.
And I'm not going to talk with you about Albert Einstein.
И также не говорил о Альберте Эйнштейне,
Because they could not fit in.
он даже не поступал.
And our biggest inventions, our biggest art, music,
И все большие открытия, и также художественные произведения,
are created by our imagination.
они все создавались нашим воображением.
And if we're going to teach children to meditate,
Если мы обучали медитировать,
maybe the so-called attention deficit disorder is going to disappear.
и тогда может быть дефицит,
Attention deficit disorder, please.
дефицит внимания пропал.
Okay. Because when was this disorder 20 years ago?
Где же была эта болезнь 20 лет назад?
Somebody invented it.
Кто-то просто ее придумал.
Some children are too intelligent and too active to just sit still and listen to irrelevant material.
Просто несколько детей настолько интеллигентны, что они просто слушаются.
What happened in school?
Что происходит в школе?
We learn to compete with each other.
То, что мы общаемся, это соревноваться.
We don't learn how to cooperate with each other.
И никто не научит, как коллективироваться.
So I want you to imagine
И можете представить,
that in the primary school,
когда в начальной школе
I walk into a primary classroom.
и я приходил,
Teacher came in the morning.
и учитель пришел,
Good morning, children.
сказал: добрый день.
Good morning, teacher.
Все отвечали.
How we feeling okay today?
И там спрашивал: как вы себя чувствуете?
Okay.
Хорошо.
Everybody okay? We can study now.
И вот это мы можем начинать учиться.
Imagine we start each day with a sharing.
Если мы начали каждый день нас
Let's talk about dreams,
говорили наших снов,
about feelings,
наших чувств,
about emotions,
своих эмоций,
what's happening in the family.
то, что произошло в семье.
Let's teach children to express their feelings and their needs.
И учить детей произносить, как они чувствуют.
Because you see, what we do as a therapist,
И если посмотрим, что мы делаем как терапевт,
we're sitting in our therapy room
мы просто сидим в кабинете,
and we're waiting until somebody will have some kind of a emotional or physical imbalance.
и просто смотрим, ждем, когда появится эмоциональная, физическая.
We fix them,
Мы будем его
we teach them techniques how to overcome it,
мы обучаем, как делиться с этим.
we've got therapeutic techniques,
Мы обучаем техникам.
We can do some drumming,
Мы делаем какие-то звуки барабанов,
holotropic breath work,
электрическое дыхание,
some shamanic work.
шаманское.
Everything is great.
Все хорошо.
And we're going to send this enlightened spiritual person
И тогда создается просветленный человек.
back to the destructive society.
И тогда мы такого человека бросаем в деструктивное сообщество.
Why? What have we done?
Зачем мы это все делаем?
So, let's talk now about the higher school, a gymnasium.
Будем говорить о старших классах.
Okay. Imagine that you are told
Представляете, что-то сказано.
that from now on, when you pass an exam,
И сейчас, когда мы проходим на экзамен,
you don't receive your individual mark anymore.
мы не будем получать оценки.
You are put in the group of 5 students.
И будем разделяться в группы.
Each student has a strength in another subject,
И каждый из них силен в каком-то предмете.
and you are responsible for each other.
И каждый отвечает за других.
So we teach you how to cooperate and now how to compete.
И будем обучать, как соединяться между собой, как контактироваться между собой.
It sounds a little bit like a socialist idea, not a capitalist idea.
Как будто звучит социалистская идея, а не капиталистическая.
Right. But if we look at the competition in the capitalist society,
Если мы посмотрим на то, что происходит в соревновании в обществе,
we see the state of economy now.
это то, что происходит в экономике.
Because if I compete against you,
Если люди будут соревноваться с тобой,
I need to fail you in order to succeed.
когда кто-то побеждает, кто-то теряет.
Now, to do revolution in the educational system,
Чтобы создать революцию образования,
no. To do a reform in the educational system, to do a reform,
чтобы сделать
In the education system.
реформу,
the educational system is the system that have seen the most reform in the world.
надо сделать
The most reforms in the world.
это была бы самая большая реформа в всем мире.
Every time there's a new minister of education,
Каждый раз, когда появится новый министр обучения,
and this minister needs to prove that he done something important,
и он хочет создать область, что он что-то важное делает,
he changed something about the system
чтобы менять систему
and make it more and more complicated.
и делать эту систему более и более непонятной.
Because we learn content.
Потому что мы просто изучаем содержание.
And we do research.
И делаем, не делаем,
We do research.
не делаем
Research.
исследования.
Now, if research is not applicable,
Если
if we cannot use research,
мы этот результат не можем использовать,
the research is useless.
и тогда это просто
Because we're talking more about content rather than the process.
потому что говорим о том, что там внутри, а не о процессе, как это делается.
And we also need to talk about the context.
И также у нас надо думать о контексте,
Because human beings are naturally different and diverse.
потому что человеческие существа очень разные.
I remember when I was in Africa
И я помню, когда я был в Африке,
and I was lecturing to African psychologists,
и говорил лекции с психологами,
they were actually very angry
они стали очень злые.
because they said,
Они сказали,
why we have to study Central European theories of psychology?
зачем надо обучаться западной теории,
We have nothing to do with our African life.
а это никак не связано с нашей жизнью.
Why we have to study about Freud?
Зачем можно учиться о нашем Фройде?
Do you know that according to the African Psychological Society,
Он ничего не знает о африканской сообществе.
there is no such thing as schizophrenia?
В Африке нет шизофрении.
When you hear voices,
Если мы слышим голос,
you better listen
и это мы просто
Your ancestors are trying to tell you something. So in a way, instead of creating an inner conflict within the heart and mind, let's create some balance and harmony. I want you to imagine university. Because we go today to university and we have entrance exams. Entrance exams, yeah? Okay. What they are testing. I remember I was talking to a young man, and I usually ask people what they do in life because I'm very interested in people. He said, I'm studying in university. I'm asking what? Taxation. Tax. I said, why? He said, I applied for 5 different subjects in different universities, and this is the only one I was accepted to. So how do we choose what we want to do? When I was little, my mother told me, when you go to university, not if, but when, 2 subjects. Or you study law or you study medicine. Everything else is a waste of time. So I went to university to study philosophy. I'm not going to tell you what my mother said. What do we know around the age of 20 about life? I want you to, for a moment, to go back to the age when you were around 20. And think for a moment how you've chosen your education or occupation. Are you done it to please a parent? Are you done it because all your friends went to study that? Or because there is money in it? Maybe we should stop looking for jobs and we look for occupation. So just a few days ago I finished writing a project with some friends that is giving opportunity to children that have dropped out of school, because according to the humanistic principle, I believe that everybody has the potential to self-actualize. To create a special program for children that drop from school or finish high school and they don't know what they want to do, to take them through a program that they start to establish their identity, be aware of their passion and mission, and create groups, cooperations of people that want to produce different things. Or it's ecological products, or it's some art and craft, or anything that will serve society. For me, this is the real transpersonal philosophy. That we are actually doing something for humanity. And then to actually give those children that felt like losers in school, to give them some hope. To help them to recognize what is within them. Now, there is another problem of education. When we want to open a school, we write a program and we send it to the Ministry of Education for accreditation and recognition. So we need to do it in certain format. Now, there were a lot of very good philosophers that created beautiful democratic schools. The question is, why those schools stayed in the side of society and are not mainstream? What those very good people have not done yet. I want you to imagine that we collect groups of teenagers and we give them a task. You have to sit together and design a school. The ideal school. What kind of school you want to have? What do you want to learn in this school? How you want to learn it? And what kind of teacher you like to have? We never ask the customer what he wants. Remember when your mother put spinach in front of you and told you, eat, it's good for you? And every time my mother felt cold, I had to put more sweaters and coats on. Maybe we're going to ask the children what they want. I gave this lecture to teachers, and there was a scandal in the room. Young people don't know what they want. And I want you to imagine for a moment that in each school we collect a group of children and we teach them counseling skills. So instead of going to the school psychologist and the school psychologist, why are you not behaving? And for a child, a school psychologist is another adult that they don't trust. To take 20 children and they will be the counselors of other children. And the school psychologist will be the supervisor of those counselors. Now, recognition, accreditation. Maybe we should forget about it. We cannot create the educational system of the future asking permission from the bureaucrats of the past. We're constantly looking who is going to recognize us. Maybe it's time for us to say we don't recognize them. Look what's happening politically in the world now. People are going to the center of the town,
Люди ходят в центр города,
demonstrating
демонстрации,
and taking the government and the law into their own hands.
и берет просто власть в свои руки.
Maybe we should take education also into our own hands.
Может быть, нам надо делать то же самое, чтобы система обучения,
Create our own schools,
создавать свои школы.
mainly asking children what they want.
И спрашивать детей, что они хотят.
The teaching profession is the most important profession in society,
Потому что профессия учитель самое важное.
and is the most underpaid.
И также меньше всего оплачивается.
To be able to do that, we need also transpersonal institutes.
И чтобы сделать это, у нас надо трансперсональный институт.
There is one in Estonia.
Есть такой один в Эстонии.
The Latvian one is just developing.
В Латвии такой сейчас создается.
The Lithuanian Transpersonal Institute is waiting to be formed.
И также Литва сейчас живет на этом.
It's important,
Это важно.
because if we don't do that,
Если мы не будем делать это,
we are abandoning humanity to those diagnostic psychologists and psychiatrists.
тогда просто если мы будем делать это, мы создаем клиентов для психологов, психиатров.
Because I don't consider myself as a therapist.
Потому что я не хочу быть таким терапевтом.
I'm an educator.
Я больше повторяю.
I teach people to think differently.
Просто обучаю людей подумать по-другому.
I teach people to be able to ask questions and not to look for answers.
И просто обучаю людей спрашивать вопросы, а не даем ответ.
To get in touch with their spiritual identity.
И попадать в людей своей духовной личности.
Because this is the future of humanity.
Больше общества.
The teaching profession is the most important profession in the world. The teaching profession.
Профессия учитель самое важное.
And is the one with the less paid.
И также самое меньше всего оплачивается.
Okay. Now, with the kindergartens,
Начиная с детских
in some countries they already start to apply this theory, a kindergarten with meditation.
и в некоторых из них уже начинают обучать медитации.
In some of them,
Несколько из них,
they are done actually better.
и там уже делается лучше.
If you want your child in my kindergarten,
Если мой ребенок попал в свой детский сад,
you need to sign a contract
надо заключить контракт.
that once every 2 weeks
Когда один раз в неделю,
you come to a parent support group in the evening.
что родителям надо идти в группу, которая поддержит.
Because what happens to the poor child?
Что происходит с таким?
We send the child to school expecting school to do something to the child.
Мы посылаем детей в школу, чтобы школа с ними что-то сделала.
And the school sends the child back to us
И когда школа посылает детей нам обратно,
and tell us that we're not pushing enough the child to do his homework.
и говорит, что говорит нам, почему он не сделал домашнее задание.
Okay. So, if you want more information,
Если хотите больше информации,
if you want to stay in touch for those projects,
и хотите информацию на
find me on Facebook
найдите меня в Facebook.
because I don't have a business card, I've got Facebook.
Потому что нет языка, у меня есть Facebook.
As Vice President of Eurotas,
Я также президент
European Association of European Association for Personal Psychology,
которая является ассоциацией трансперсонального обучения.
we have a conference in Crete, in Greece,
Будет конференция в Греции
in the beginning of October,
в начале октября.
and there are some information here
И у меня есть информация,
regarding Eurotas,
которая из Родос.
and we consider you to join in as members.
И я хотел бы пригласить вас поучаствовать в этой конференции.
Thank you very much, thank you for your patience.